for Jung, the hero's journey was the journey inside the unconscious, and that would be perhaps in some sense that the willingness to face everything terrible that's happened to you and to think it through and to articulate it and to come to grips perhaps with your own capacity for malevolence. That was a really important part of Jungian ideas, that the first step towards individuation, which is the manifestation of your full self, let's say, was the discovery of your shadow. And your shadow is the part of you that will do terrible things under the right circumstances, and maybe even without that much provocation. And you know, and it's a terrifying part of you to come into contact with, because it's sort of the way that you're specifically attached to the archetype of evil. That's a good way of thinking about it. And you know, modern people, they don't really think much about the idea of good and evil, but that's because most of them are so damn naive, you can just barely even comprehend it. You know, if you read any history, if you really read it, like, and you don't come away with the idea that evil exists, it's like you're just reading the wrong kind of history, you know. It's just unbelievable what people can do to each other. And we're so imaginative, you know. And one of the things I figured out about people, the reason that we have the knowledge of good and evil, let's say, is that because we're self-conscious and we know about ourselves, we know about our own vulnerability, right? You know what hurts you. You really know what hurts you, way more than an animal knows. And so, and you're also creative, and so once you know what hurts you, man, you can really hurt someone else. And you can do it in such a creative way. You can draw it out. You can make it excruciating. You can take people apart physically and psychologically. And you can keep them, say, even right on the edge of death, so that you can keep doing that endlessly. And, you know, that happens. Hell of a lot more than you think it happens. It happens a lot. And so, well, and you think, well, you know, that doesn't involve me. It's like, oh yes, it does, man. That's the problem, because you know, you're human, and that's the sort of things that human beings are capable of. And I'm not saying it's all probable that you do that ever, or that, but I'm saying that, you know, you got to take that into account. When you're looking at the world and you think about all the perpetrators out there, it's like, it's not like there's perpetrators and there's victims. That isn't how it works. It doesn't work that way at all. And so the horrors of humanity, as well as the noble elements of humanity, are all elements of your central being. And for Jung, and this is the terrible thing, for Jung, the pathway to higher wisdom was through the terrible portal of, well, you could say hell, for that matter. Really. And so who wants to do that, man? It's like, no. You know, like maybe you're resentful about something. Well, you probably are, because like everybody's resentful about something, you know. And resentment is just a vicious emotion. It's really useful. It's really useful, because if you're resentful about something, it either means that you should grow the hell up and accept the responsibility and quit sniveling around and whining, or it means that someone actually is oppressing you and pushing on you too hard and bullying you and demeaning you, and you have something to say or do that you're not saying or doing. And no wonder you're not saying or doing it, because, you know, it can be really dangerous to say things or do them to free yourself from being oppressed. You can get in a lot of trouble in the short term for doing it, so it's easier just to not say anything, sort of day after day. In the short term you protect yourself, but it just crushes you. And then the resentment comes up, and resentment, man, that can just get so out of hand, you know. It starts with resentment, and then it goes to the desire for revenge, you know, because you'll play nasty little tricks on the person that's oppressing you. At any chance you'll talk about them behind their back, and if they want you to do something, you'll do it badly, or you'll do it grudgingly, or you'll do a half-rate job, and you'll set up little traps, and you know, so it puts you in a poisonous space. And then if you really start to dwell on that, say, in your basement for 3 or 4 years about just exactly how terrible the world is and how that's focused on you and how everyone's rejected you, and how you get to this point where you're thinking that, you know, existence itself is a kind of poisonous endeavor, and that the best thing for you to do is go out there and do as much, you know, create as much mayhem as you possibly can. And if you really get to a dark place, you think, I'm going to create as much mayhem as I possibly can by targeting the most innocent thing I can possibly imagine. And then you end up shooting kids in Connecticut. And that's how you get there. And so that's a bad road, man. There's dark things down there, but you can go there, and people do. And they go through the hole of resentment. And so resentment can tell you, you've got something to say. You bloody well better say it. You gotta free yourself from what's oppressing you. You have to stand up for that, because otherwise you become oppressed, and then once you're oppressed, that's just not so good. And so, like in your marriage and your relationships, you got to tell people what you're thinking. You don't have to assume you're right. That's a whole different story, because you're not, because you're, you know, ignorant and you're biased, and, you know, so you're not right, but you can stumble towards the expression of yourself, and then you can listen to the other person and hope that they tell you some way that you're stupid that's useful, so you can be a little less stupid in the future, because wouldn't that be good? And so, you know, you go after the unknown. You don't protect what you know. You already know what you know. You go after what you don't know. That's why you have to talk to people you don't agree with. That's why you have to talk to your enemies, because they're going to tell you things you don't know. You could even listen to them. It's possible they know a thing or two you don't know. But people don't like that, you know. They just talk to people who think the same way, and then they just stay stupid. And so that's not good, because if you're not wise, the world will wallop you. It'll flatten you, and far more than it has to. And then you'll be bitter and resentful, and you'll be part of that force that wallops instead of the force that fights against that.